Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about racism again, and we're going to continue on with that subject.
So, I don't know if we mentioned it in the break, before the break, or in the first segment, where, we get, I guess, criticized by our own people for being not looking Native enough or not being Native enough. And I find one of the biggest insults in Kahnawake is to say you're a Frenchman.
Which is really funny that it's an insult because there's tons of French people all over the place. Even people from France, they're Frenchmen. It's just stating something, but I understand that.
Well, it's because it's people. I'm not saying everyone from town, but those people who say those types of insults or say you're white, or it's they associate being white with French, and with French as being bad, and French as being racist.
Because of where we live, because the surroundings around us is all French, and because a lot of the racism that happens is generally from French people towards people from here. There's that automatic, you're French because you're bad.
I think it's ironic that the language that we speak is the language of the most oppressive people to our to natives. It's not French at all. Well, not to Mohawks in particular. But if you look at all in the United States in the 18th and 19th centuries, when they started to put in reservations and whatnot, it was English-speaking Americans who put in a whole bunch of laws, schooling laws, whatnot, reservation laws, kicking natives off their land, placing them in homes, taking children away from their parents. It was oppression by English people, as it was in Canada in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as well.
It's really interesting to look back on the history of that kind of stuff. If you actually were to look down at what has actually happened, it's crazy. It's almost like you're accusing the wrong people. I mean, granted though, right, the racism that goes on today as opposed to looking back in the past, then you're accusing the right people if you're talking directly to that person. One of the things though that I learned this summer when I was working was I did a workshop on racism actually. And one of the things that I made sure to look up was a statistic about the languages spoken by Aboriginal people across Quebec. And the number of Francophone Aboriginal people in Quebec is significantly higher. It was something like 60% of Quebec's Aboriginal people speak French.
I mean, that's just in general. I mean, if you speak English and you're in Quebec, you're a minority.
Yeah.
And it's just weird how we associate that being French is white, and it's...
I think, well, the thing is too, right, is because I went to school off reserve, I had to learn it. I was immersed in the French language from the beginning. So I like to consider myself fluent until, I sat in an interview today, and the woman was asking me questions in French, and I was like... all of a sudden drawing every blank.
Why can't you formulate the sentence?
Yeah. But the thing is, though, is that I think I'd like to hope that I have a better chance at getting jobs outside of Kahnawake because I do speak French. And I think that because we live in Quebec, French is important. It is an important language to know and to consider.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's English is the minority language. And even in Kahnawake, I think it's important for you to know because... I mean, people like to think, like I said earlier, that Kahnawake is this little bubble, and but if you're gonna have a business, there's even certain fields where you need to make connections with other people, other businesses where they may not be able to speak English, and sometimes it's because they refuse to speak English, but whatever, that's a whole different story. But I mean, for example, our sales consultant at Mohawk TV, she has to speak French if she goes to advertisers who are, only speak French.
Well, I also don't understand why the main language in Kahnawake isn't French, historically speaking, because this was settled by the French. Kahnawake was settled by the French Jesuits. Yes, Mohawks first came in contact with the Dutch, but then for 3 centuries the English. And then Kahnawake was established here by the French Jesuits.
That's why Catholic is predominant.
Exactly.
But I'm pretty sure I know why it's mostly English. It's because of those connections to ironworking in New York and,
Yeah, well, I was also going to say that throughout that time, family family members who didn't want to convert to Christianity and live here traveled back and forth to visit family. So and if they were speaking English, they were probably speaking their own language for sure, Mohawk. But if they had a second language coming from New York, it would be English rather than French.
Yeah.
But I still don't understand how English developed around here as the primary language. But it is important to know French in Quebec, definitely.
It's an asset.
It is an asset. That's true.
And that's what I mean. At one side, we're really lucky because if you do have a job in Kahnawake, you can survive without the French language. And I kind of feel bad for people who live in Montreal and, who are Anglophones and they don't speak French that well. And I think it's harder for them to find jobs because they don't, have this little place that they can go to that is
Yeah, they don't have the English safe haven to go find work.
Yeah. I mean, the people who are Aboriginal and whether they're Cree or whatever nation, and speak only French or their, native language, it's well, no, they're not white, So why
especially
do we make
if
those
they're darker
associations?
than me, if they're 100% Cree living up north and they're fluent in French. That isn't the language that, really, if it came down to language that identifies a person, then we should all be speaking Mohawk. And that should be, I think, the way that if language were the definition, right? And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to incorporate back into the community is bringing the language back so that you can identify with that. And so until the day that everybody speaks their own language again, I don't think language is really something that can be used against one another.
Yeah. And it's what you were saying, you mentioned the United States earlier, and I find it weird how Kahnawake really associates itself with I guess being American rather than Canadian or Quebec. Obviously you're never gonna see someone from town be I'm a proud Quebecois or or even I'm Canadian, but it's they wouldn't mind being yeah, I'm American.
Well, that's really funny. I wrote an essay about that in school.
And
yeah.
I mean I understand how obviously Kahnawake has connections to the United States because there's other reserves, but because of ironworking and stuff like that. But
there's also a history behind it too, right? Because even for the Mohawk people, originally we started in the Mohawk Valley of New York. That's where our original land started. So there's that big tie to the land as, in traditional ways, you're always going back to your roots and you're always caring about where you come from and stuff like that. It's really important. And at the same time, there's this sense of nationhood that I think that a lot of Aboriginal people feel is they feel a connection with other Aboriginal people regardless as to where they live. So when you're going down, when I went out east with my family, we stopped in a Micmac reserve to go visit and see what's going on down there, see what it's like as opposed to here. And, you feel that kind of connection with them because your past is their past, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of carries through with why people are so connected to other countries like that.
But I guess why I mentioned it was because right now it's election time, for Canada. And I don't know if you are following it. I'm not really, but
we're bad.
It's just how going back to when it was the US elections, there were so many people who were my age and they were so focused in on the election and knew stuff about it, and they're yeah, Obama's healthcare plan, and I was why are you paying more attention to their politics when you don't live there? And I understand it's a spectacle and they're more dramatic there, but people will be totally opposed of voting for the federal elections here, but they're going to be really interested in it there. Which doesn't mean I'm going to vote, but it's just because whoever gets elected, whichever party, it does have an impact on us, whereas whatever the States does, it ultimately has an impact on us, eventually, because we're so close, and capitalism and consumerism and all that. But
I don't think a lot of people put a lot of thought into those things. It's more just, you know what? I couldn't even answer that question. I don't really know what it is that connects people. It's an individual. So if they're gonna be excited for an election that they don't get to vote in, then it would be nice, I guess, to consider your own country that you're living in, especially considering they decide for you what's going to happen.
Yeah, people people here don't like to admit that, well, we live in Canada or we live in Quebec, but I mean, the fact is, like, their government affects us, like, no matter what. Kahnawake isn't this little bubble, like, sovereign bubble thing, like, it's not gonna be like that. I don't think, well, I don't want to say ever, but, I mean.
You never know. Anything is possible.
Anyway, I guess that's just me being pessimistic and realistic. But with that, that's all the time we have for this week's show. Thank you, JD, for coming on and being a guest panelist.
You're welcome.
If you have any comments or questions, you can email us at mohawktv@hotmail.com. Or you can give us a call at 450-632-6397. You can also check out our new website at www.mohawktv.ca, or you can visit our Facebook group. So thank you. Hope you enjoyed the show, and see you again in 2 weeks. Anna.
Anna.
Anna.